3 days before my Bachelorette weekend, I overheard my fiancé paying our wedding planner to sabotage it so my friends couldn't tell me he'd been cheating with his ex for 5 months. My name is Marisol Vance, and before this happened, I believed I understood the people I trusted and the life I had built. I walked into our wedding planner's office on a Thursday afternoon with a deposit check in my purse and a list of tiny wedding errands in my hand. The kind of list that makes you feel productive even when all you're really doing is moving money from one account to another and confirming flower colors for the 5th time. I had expected to be there maybe 10 minutes. Drop off the check, confirm the final cake tasting, ask if Priscilla had received the updated linen sample photos, and leave. That was it. Instead, the door to her back conference room was slightly open, and I heard my fiancé's voice drifting out in that low, polished tone he used with clients and sales reps. It was not the voice he used with me. I stopped in the hall without meaning to, one hand still on my purse strap, because something in the words made me slow down. "The timing needs to look accidental," Desmond said. There was a pause, and then Priscilla Nakamura replied, calm and efficient as always. "I understand. We can make it look like a venue issue if it has to be explained at all." I remember the blood draining out of my face so fast that my ears started ringing. I did not move. I did not breathe properly. I just stood there, half hidden by the frosted glass panel beside the door, while my fiancé and my wedding planner discussed making something look accidental. Desmond continued, "It needs to fall apart before Saturday. If she gets everyone in the same room, I lose control of the whole thing." Priscilla said, "If the reservation gets cancelled and the spa appointments shift, it creates enough confusion. But I need you to understand the additional cost is separate. This is not part of the wedding planning contract. Pay whatever it takes," he said. "Just make sure it doesn't happen the way they want it to." I think I stopped hearing the rest. There was more, maybe. A reference to a call list, something about a backup option. But the part that lodged in my brain was the phrase they both treated like it was ordinary business. Don't let it happen the way they want it to. My own Bachelorette weekend. They were talking about sabotaging my own Bachelorette weekend. I want to say I felt one clean emotion, something simple like anger or shock. But the truth is, it was more like 5 emotions colliding at once, and none of them making room for the others. I was confused first, because I could not understand why Desmond would care about a weekend he was not even supposed to attend. Then I was furious, because whatever his reason was, he had gone to our wedding planner to interfere with something my friends had been building for months. Then I felt something colder than anger, a hard, alert stillness, because in that instant I understood that if I went into that room and confronted them right then, they would know I had heard enough to make them panic. I did not know what they were hiding. I did not know why. But I knew, very clearly, that if I stormed in and demanded answers, Desmond would do what he always did when cornered, explain just enough to sound reasonable, smile when he lied, and leave me with a version of events that would take me weeks to untangle. So I did something that surprised even me. I left. I walked past the front desk like I had forgotten the check. I handed the envelope to the assistant with a calm I absolutely did not feel and said Priscilla had told me to leave it there. I smiled. I thanked her. I got into my car. And only once I had shut the door and locked it did I realize my hands were shaking so badly I had to put both of them around the steering wheel just to make them stop. I was 30 years old when this happened, and I had been engaged to Desmond Holloway for 14 months. We had met through a mutual friend at a gallery opening downtown, the kind of event where everyone pretends to be more cultured than they are, and no one is actually looking at the paintings. Desmond was funny in a controlled, bright way, the kind of man who always seemed to know exactly what to say at exactly the right moment. He remembered names, remembered drinks, remembered the small details people told him. He also remembered how to make a room turn toward him. That had felt charming when we first met. By the time we got engaged, it had become part of the foundation of our relationship. Desmond was the one who could calm an argument, smooth over a mishap, talk to a rude waiter, keep a family dinner from turning tense. I was the one who planned, organized, worried about practical things. We fit in the way people around us like to describe as complementary. Priscilla had been recommended to us by 2 different couples who swore she was calm under pressure, impossibly organized, and worth every penny. She owned a boutique planning firm that specialized in elegant, slightly modern weddings, the kind with candlelight, clean lines, expensive florals, and every logistical detail hidden behind a polished smile. I had felt lucky when we booked her. She seemed like the sort of planner who made crises disappear before they touched the bride. Now, sitting in my car with the afternoon sun slanting across the windshield, I realized I had just overheard my fiancé and that same planner conspiring to make something disappear before I ever knew it had been threatened. The first thing I did was drive home and sit in my kitchen with my phone in my hand, staring at Wren's name. Wren was my maid of honor and my college roommate, which meant she knew me so well she could tell from one text if I was lying about being fine. She and the rest of my closest friends had spent months secretly planning my Bachelorette weekend. I knew enough to know there was a trip involved and a Saturday surprise, but they had been maddeningly vague about details. Wren kept saying she wanted it to feel special. I had laughed and told her I trusted her, because I did. I called her that evening instead of texting. Text messages could be forwarded, screenshotted, deleted. I needed to hear her voice. "Hey," she said when she picked up. "You're early, is everything okay?" I almost said no immediately. I almost told her everything, but something in me said, wait. If Desmond and Priscilla were willing to coordinate sabotage, I needed to understand exactly what they thought they were stopping. "I just wanted to check on Saturday," I said, keeping my voice light. "You know the Bachelorette thing. Are we still on?" There was the smallest pause. "Of course," Wren said. "Why?" "No reason," I said. "I'm just curious what the plan is."
She laughed too quickly. "You know I can't tell you that. Can you tell me at least where we're supposed to be?" Another pause. Longer this time. I knew Wren well enough to hear when she was choosing words with care. "Mari," she said gently, "I really need you to trust me until Saturday." That was when I knew. She was protecting something. Not just surprise party nonsense, but something serious enough that she sounded careful. "Wren," I said, trying not to let my voice shift, "I need you to tell me if this is about Desmond." The silence on the other end was so complete I thought the call dropped. "Why would you ask that?" she said finally. "Because I heard him talking to Priscilla about making it fall apart before Saturday," I thought. Instead I said, "Just answer me." She inhaled slowly. "Can I come over?" She arrived 40 minutes later with a paper grocery bag of takeout and a face that looked like she had spent all day arguing with herself. She set the bag on my kitchen counter, sat down, and looked at me for a long second before she spoke. "We were going to tell you Saturday," she said. My stomach tightened. "Tell me what?" Wren folded her hands together so hard her knuckles went pale. "A few of us found out Desmond has been in contact with Colette Fenwick." Colette. The name hit me like a cold splash to the chest. I knew who she was, of course. Everyone who had dated Desmond in any serious way seemed to leave behind a story or two, and Colette was the only ex he had ever spoken about with any visible irritation. He had told me they had ended badly years ago, that she was controlling and dramatic, and that the breakup had been ugly enough to make him cautious afterward. I had never met her. I had never cared to. "In contact how?" I asked. Wren's eyes were full of worry now, and something like shame. "At first it was just messages," she said. "At least that's what we thought. Then one of the girls saw him at a restaurant downtown. He wasn't alone. It looked intimate. There were more messages after that, apparently. A few friends who know both of them started comparing notes, and it turned into this awful realization that it wasn't some random check-in. It had been going on for months. I sat down slowly because my legs no longer felt like mine. "Months?" She nodded. "How many months?" Wren looked at me with a pain I can still remember if I let myself. "We think almost 5. I stared at her. "You all knew for 5 months?" I asked. "No," she said quickly. "We didn't know at first. We pieced it together, and once we realized we didn't want to dump it on you over text or in some parking lot or when you were alone. We wanted to tell you when you had people around you who loved you." I could barely process that sentence. 5 months. 5 months of hidden messages, dinners, lies. 5 months of me trusting Desmond when he said he was out of town for work training. 5 months of phone calls I hadn't questioned enough. "Saturday," Wren said softly. "We were going to tell you at the Bachelorette. That was the plan. I know it sounds insane now, but we thought it was the safest time. We thought you'd have us there." Then the pattern came together in a way that made my throat go dry. "Desmond knows," I said. Wren blinked. "What? He knows you're going to tell me." That made her sit up straighter. "How would he know?" I told her. "Not every word at first, but enough. The open conference room, the phrase timing needs to look accidental, the comment about it falling apart before Saturday, the extra cost, the way Priscilla had spoken like a contractor handling a scheduling issue instead of a woman planning a friend's emotional intervention." Wren covered her mouth with her hand. "No," she whispered. "Yes," I said. "And they're doing it together." I expected her to ask how I knew. Instead, she went very still. "Priscilla has been weird with Desmond all along," I said. "I noticed she took his calls directly sometimes, but I assumed it was because he was easier than me to coordinate with." Wren let out a breath that was almost a laugh, except it wasn't funny at all. "Mari," she said, "I need to tell the others." "Not yet," I said, sharper than I intended. She looked startled. I want to know exactly what this is before we do anything. If I confront him now, he'll turn it into a conversation. He'll explain. He'll distract. I need proof. Wren looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, she said. Then we get proof. That night I barely slept. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every memory I could think of. Every time Desmond had taken a call in another room. Every time Priscilla had insisted on handling logistics through him instead of through me. Every time he had seemed unavailable on weekends he said were work-related. I kept thinking I must have missed signs so obvious they were laughing at me. But as the hours passed, a different thought took shape. If Desmond was cheating, maybe that alone was the reason he wanted the Bachelorette weekend sabotaged. Maybe he knew my friends were about to tell me and wanted to delay the conversation. But why use Priscilla? Why pay her? Unless this wasn't just about cheating. Unless there was something else. By morning I had decided I needed to know the full truth before I made any move. I didn't want to fight. I wanted a record. I hired Odalys because one of Wren's cousins had used her in a custody dispute years ago and said she was quiet, thorough, and impossible to rattle. Odalys met me in a coffee shop on a Tuesday morning, a plain woman in her 40s with a notebook, sharp eyes, and the energy of someone who had seen every kind of lie and had gotten bored by most of them. Tell me exactly what you know, she said. So I did. I told her about the overheard conversation, about Wren's confession, about Colette Fenwick, about the wedding planner. You want me to verify the relationship and the planner's involvement, she said. I want to know the whole shape of it, I said. How long, where, what they were doing, who knew what, and why Priscilla was helping him. She nodded once, as if I had just asked for a grocery list. Give me 2 to 3 weeks, she said, and don't tip anyone off. Those 2 to 3 weeks were some of the longest of my life. I had to keep seeing Desmond while pretending I was still the same woman who had walked into Priscilla's office that Thursday afternoon. We lived together, which meant I had to watch him sleep, eat breakfast, kiss my forehead before leaving for the office, and act like the world had not shifted under my feet. He noticed I was quieter. Everything okay? He asked one evening while he poured 2 glasses of wine. Fine, I said. You seem off. Wedding stress, I said. He gave me a sympathetic smile that made my skin crawl in retrospect. We're close, he said. Once the weekend is over, it'll get easier. He meant the wedding weekend, I think, but hearing the phrase weekend is over after what I knew now made my jaw tighten. Wren and the others kept me informed just enough to keep me from panicking. They had decided, after I told them what I overheard, to keep the Bachelorette weekend in place but to build a backup plan around it. Wren did not trust Priscilla, not after what I told her. She quietly booked an alternate venue herself, without telling anyone except the 2 bridesmaids who were helping her coordinate. She said she didn't want a manufactured problem to derail the conversation, and I loved her for that, in a way that still makes my chest ache. Meanwhile, Odalys worked. The first thing she confirmed was that Colette Fenwick was not just some random woman from Desmond's past. She was an old girlfriend from before he and I met, and there was a clear timeline of contact that had started up again after our engagement. Not casual, not accidental. Regular texts, calls, meals, weekends away. Odalys documented hotel stays in a city about 40 minutes from us, a place with decent restaurants, chain hotels, and enough anonymity for people who don't want to be seen. 3 of those weekends lined up exactly with trips Desmond had told me were work training or conference prep. When Odalys showed me the dates, I felt something in my chest collapse. He said he was in Denver, I said, staring at the printout. He wasn't, she said simply. How sure are you? She tapped another page. Very. Hotels, timestamps, parking records, and witness confirmation from a restaurant hostess who recognized him on 2 separate occasions. He and Colette had dinner at the same place twice. I put the paper down and covered my face with both hands. I wanted to be sick, but I also wanted to be angry, and I also wanted to scream at myself for how stupid I had been. Instead, I sat there in the middle of the coffee shop and tried to breathe through a pain so sharp it felt almost physical. There's more, Odalys said. Of course there was. I found the planner. That made me look up. Priscilla's relationship to Desmond turned out to be the kind of thing that seems impossible until it is laid in front of you in clean black and white. They had attended the same university. They had been in overlapping social circles. They were not close enough that I would have ever expected it to matter, but close enough that they had maintained contact over the years in a loose, friendly way. Nothing alarming at first glance. Nothing that would have raised my suspicion when we hired her. But once Odalys got into the vendor coordination platform Priscilla's firm used, things became uglier. There were message logs. Not full private messages, because that would have required a warrant and a level of access Odalys did not need. but enough metadata and business communication logs to show that Desmond had contacted Priscilla directly about the Bachelorette weekend after learning, through what looked like an accidental slip by a mutual acquaintance, that the girls were planning something. Then he had asked for a favor. Not in those exact words. The phrasing was subtle and polished, but the meaning was obvious. Make sure it doesn't happen the way they want it to. Priscilla had responded with a list of options, each one designed to cause confusion without making the sabotage look deliberate. A venue double booking, a shift in spa reservations, a vendor mix-up. She had even suggested a minor email delay that would make the group think the schedule had simply changed on its own. And then there was the part that made me feel physically cold. She had referred to it as damage control consulting, and Desmond had agreed to pay an additional fee, separate from our contract. I remember staring at those words and feeling less like a person and more like an object someone had moved around without my consent. Priscilla had not merely failed me professionally, she had chosen my fiancé's secret over her own client. She had accepted money from the man cheating on me in order to interfere with the moment my friends had planned to tell me the truth. I asked Odalys whether she thought Priscilla knew about Colette specifically. Not at first, she said. But by the time she agreed to help, she knew it was about something he was hiding from you. Whether she knew infidelity was involved, I can't prove yet. But she knew she was not acting in your interest. That distinction mattered to me, but only a little. By then I no longer cared whether Priscilla had known the exact contents of the secret. She had made a decision. That was enough. At that point I had proof of cheating and proof of interference. But I still wasn't ready to explode my own life in public without seeing how far the sabotage would go. I wanted one more thing. I wanted to watch their plan fail. Wren understood immediately when I told her. "You're actually going to let the weekend happen?" she asked. "Yes," I said, "but not the way they expect." So we tightened the net. Wren moved the conversation location to the backup venue. Quietly. She said the original place felt cursed now, and I didn't argue. The backup venue was a little private garden space attached to a small restaurant run by a woman named Beatrix Solano, who had become more sympathetic the more awkwardly. Wren explained that this was a surprise event that may need to stay flexible. Beatrix, bless her, didn't ask questions. She just confirmed the reservation and told us to call her if anything changed. Then we waited for Priscilla to strike. She did it exactly when Odalys said she would. The cancellation notice came through in the middle of a Friday afternoon, with a breezy, apologetic note about unforeseen double booking issues and a promise to suggest alternate times once the conflict was resolved. It was phrased so professionally that if you didn't know better, you might think it was a normal scheduling problem. Wren forwarded me the email with 3 words. She really did it. I sat on my couch and laughed once, because sometimes the absurdity of the truth is the only thing that keeps you from crying. Instead of panicking, Wren shifted the group to the backup venue exactly as planned. Priscilla's cancellation had created a minor logistical headache, but not the collapse Desmond wanted. In fact, the only thing it accomplished was confirming everything Odalys had uncovered. On Saturday afternoon, my friends gathered me at the backup place, and for the first time since this had begun, I let myself be surrounded by the people who had spent months trying to protect me. They looked nervous when I walked in, not because of the party itself, but because the real conversation was still ahead of us. There were 6 of them, all dressed in soft colors and trying too hard to be casual. Wren hugged me first, harder than usual. Then my other friends, Lena, Tasha, Priya, Michelle, and Brooke, each looking like they had not slept well in days. We sat around a long table in the garden space while the restaurant staff brought out water and small plates and politely pretended they were not serving emotional collapse along with the appetizers. Wren started, then stopped. "I don't know how to say this," she admitted. "Just say it," I told her. So they did. They told me that the first clue had been a message from Colette to one of our mutual friends. Then another friend had seen Desmond at lunch with her. Then a different person had noticed the same pattern of unexplained weekends and suspiciously polished excuses. The more they compared notes, the more obvious it became that Desmond had not merely reconnected with his ex. He had been carrying on with her in a way that felt intentional, comfortable, and far beyond the boundary of casual contact. They told me about the thing I had already guessed. They had decided to tell me during the Bachelorette because they wanted me surrounded when I heard it. They were afraid if they told me in private, I might drive home alone and fall apart by myself. They wanted witnesses, they wanted support, they wanted to be able to catch me. There was nothing theatrical in the way they said it. That was what made it hurt more. They were frightened for me, and they had been carrying that fear for weeks. When they finished, the table went quiet.
I looked at each of them and realized they were bracing for me to break. Instead, I said, I already knew. Their faces changed all at once.
What do you mean? Lena asked. I told them about overhearing Desmond and Priscilla, about the sabotage, about Odalys, about the hotel stays, the message logs, the side payment, the conference room, the line about timing. The shock on their faces was immediate and total. Tasha pressed a hand to her chest. Brooke said, Oh my God. Wren looked half furious and half relieved. You should have told us sooner, she said. I needed the proof first. I said. No, she said, but she was already crying. I mean, you should have told us when you overheard them. We would have handled it. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You did handle it, I said. You found me a backup venue. You kept the conversation alive. You didn't let them decide when I was allowed to know the truth. There was a long silence after that. Then Michelle started crying too, which made everyone else laugh through tears, because once one person starts crying in a group of women who have been holding things in for months, it becomes contagious. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking through every ugly detail. They asked questions. I answered them as calmly as I could. Some of them had been afraid I would blame them for not telling me sooner. I didn't. I knew exactly how difficult it must have been to watch me plan a life with a man they knew was lying to me and still have to smile at brunch. There was one moment I remember with absolute clarity. Priya, who was usually the quietest among us, leaned forward and said, The worst part is not that he cheated, it's that he let us all care about you while he was doing it. That sentence sat in the middle of the table like something heavy and true, because that was exactly what it was. Desmond had accepted my friend's time, my family's warmth, my planning, my trust. He had stood beside me in photographs and kissed me in kitchen doorways and talked about the future while conducting a second private life. After the conversation, after the tears and the tea and the increasingly messy plates of untouched food, I drove home in a daze so complete I barely remembered the route. Desmond was there when I walked in. He was sitting in the living room with one ankle resting on the opposite knee, tie loosened, looking exactly like a man waiting for news. He stood when he saw my face. How was it? He asked. I stared at him. You don't get to ask me that, I said. Something flickered behind his eyes. Not panic yet, calculation. Marisol, what are you talking about? I did not sit down. I did not take my coat off. I stayed standing so I wouldn't have to pretend comfort. I know about Colette. His face changed, just enough. Who told you that? Don't. I said. Don't ask me that like you still have control over the conversation. We need to talk. No, I said. You need to listen. And then I laid it all out. I told him I had overheard him and Priscilla discussing my Bachelorette weekend. I told him I knew he had hired her to sabotage it. I told him I knew he had been seeing Colette for months. I told him about the hotel stays and the lies and the work trips that weren't work trips. I told him I knew about the side payment and the damage control consulting fee and the fact that he had tried to stop my friends from telling me the truth. The color drained from his face in stages. At first he denied nothing. Then he denied the worst parts. Then he shifted to minimizing. It wasn't what it sounded like, he said. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. So you and Priscilla were just having a lively discussion about the ethics of event planning. I was trying to prevent a disaster. A disaster? Wren and the others were going to corner you and humiliate you. By telling me you were cheating on me, I was going to tell you myself. That was when I realized he had been preparing that lie for some time. When? I asked. He hesitated. Soon. Soon when? Before the wedding. After 5 months? He ran a hand over his face. It got complicated. I looked at him for a very long second. There are moments in a breakup when you expect the other person to look ashamed, or broken, or at least human. Desmond looked offended. That was what startled me most. Offended that I had interrupted his timeline. You don't get to call it complicated, I said. You don't get to use that word like you were trapped by circumstances. You lied to me. You kept seeing her. You asked my wedding planner to interfere with my friends. I didn't want you to be blindsided. You wanted to control when I found out. That landed. He didn't answer immediately. Marisol, he said carefully, if you heard part of a conversation, you don't know everything. I know enough. No, you don't. Try me. He looked at me then, really looked, and I could see him calculating whether a partial truth might still save him. It was almost insulting how familiar the expression was. He had always been good at finding the slope between honesty and evasion. Colette reached out to me, he said. We ran into each other. It wasn't supposed to go anywhere. But it did. He didn't deny that. And Priscilla, old friend, that's all. You paid her. Because I needed help. To sabotage my friends. To manage the situation. You mean to stop me from hearing the truth? He didn't say yes, but he didn't need to. I stood there in the living room while the man I was supposed to marry tried to explain his betrayal as if it were a scheduling conflict he had mishandled. We're calling off the wedding, I said. He blinked. Marisol, don't be rash. Don't insult me. This is not the end of us. That was his mistake. Not the cheating, not the lies, not even the sabotage. The mistake was thinking he still had a place in the conversation after everything I knew. It is for me, I said. He took a step toward me. Please don't do this in anger. I'm not in anger, I said, which was true in the strangest way. The anger was there, but underneath it something cleaner had taken over. I'm in clarity. I left him standing there and went into the bedroom to pack a bag. The next morning I called the venue coordinator, the florist, the photographer, the caterer, the band, and every other vendor whose number had made it into my phone over 14 months of planning. I canceled the wedding. I explained as much as I needed to explain, which was very little. People tend to understand the phrase "we are no longer getting married." Most of them hear it often enough that they don't press for detail unless they know you well. Some were sympathetic in the shallow way businesses are sympathetic. Others were genuinely kind. Beatrix Solano, my caterer, was one of the kind ones. "I'm sorry," she said, after I explained that the wedding was off. "So am I. Do you want the full refund discussion now or later?" I almost laughed. Now, if possible.
She looked through my contract and told me what could be returned, what couldn't, and which deposits were protected by timing. Then she hesitated and said, "I've been in this business 20 years. I've seen 2 brides cancel for reasons like this. Both of them thanked me later." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just thanked her for being decent about it. Priscilla was not decent. The morning after I ended things with Desmond, I emailed her firm with a formal termination notice citing undisclosed conflict of interest and breach of trust. Then I called the state's Event Planning Association to ask about filing a complaint. I was careful, calm, and extremely specific. I attached the evidence Odalys had compiled, which was more than enough to show that Priscilla had acted against my interests as a paying client for an undisclosed personal reason and an outside payment. She called me twice before I answered. I let the third call go through. "Marisol," she said immediately, trying for warmth and landing on panic instead. "I think there has been a misunderstanding." "There isn't. If Desmond told you anything, you need to understand he was extremely upset. You shouldn't have taken his money." Silence. "I don't know what you think you know," she said carefully. "I know enough. This could become very messy for everyone if we do this publicly." I almost admired the nerve it took to say that. "You should have thought of that before you agreed to sabotage my Bachelorette weekend." She did not deny it. "You don't understand the pressure I was under," she said. "No," I said. "I understand exactly what you did. You chose to help my fiancé hide his affair and interfere with my friends. That is not pressure. That's a decision." She started speaking again, but I hung up. After that, I submitted the complaint. I also filed a small claims action to recover the deposit we had paid her, because if someone is going to betray you professionally, the least you can do is make them answer for the money. I didn't intend to post online at first. I was tired, emotionally depleted. I wanted silence, not public spectacle. But after talking to Odalys, and after reading through the messages again, I realized that if I stayed quiet, someone else might hire Priscilla later and have no warning that she had once actively worked against a client for a client's fiancé. So I wrote a factual review. No melodrama, no insults. Just dates, behavior, and a plain account of the conflict of interest. Within a day, other people started sharing it. Then a local wedding blog picked it up. Then a consumer reporter from a nearby station called me. I did not give a dramatic interview. I did not cry on camera. I confirmed the facts, referred them to Odalys's documentation where appropriate, and kept the rest tightly controlled. The segment that aired later framed it as a vendor trust issue and a wedding planning ethics case. I suppose it was that, among other things. Priscilla's business took the hit exactly as you'd expect once people realized what had happened. Bookings vanished. Prospective clients backed away. Her name, which had once been associated with luxury and taste and calm logistics, started appearing in cautionary conversations among brides who had no interest in becoming the next version of me. I was not gloating, not exactly, but I was also not sorry. What I felt most was relief that the truth had finally become heavier than the lie. Odalys wrapped her work a week later and came by my apartment with a neat folder and a look that suggested she had not enjoyed this case but had respected it. "I don't often say this," she told me, "but you got lucky in one respect, which is, your friends were brave enough to say something before the wedding." I looked at her, and they were strategic enough to document enough of it that it couldn't be hand-waved away. That made me laugh for the first time in days. "They really did save me," I said. "Yes," she replied, very matter of fact, "and you saved yourself by not reacting in the hallway." I had not thought of it that way, but she was right. If I had walked into that conference room and thrown my anger at them too early, Desmond would have had a chance to recast the whole thing before I understood what was happening. Instead, I waited.
That waiting felt like weakness at the time. Later I understood it was actually the first decision I had made that belonged only to me. Wren and I became even closer after all of it, which seemed impossible but wasn't. There is something about surviving the same awful secret that changes the shape of a friendship. She apologized again and again for not telling me sooner, even though I had already forgiven her. You didn't owe me instant truth if it would have made me unsafe, I told her. I still hate that we were all keeping it from you. You weren't keeping it from me to hurt me. No, she said. We were trying not to be the ones who broke your heart. That was one of the most honest things anyone had ever said to me. We talked a lot during the months that followed about what it means to protect someone and what it means to control the moment they learn the truth. Desmond had tried to control that moment, so had Priscilla. My friends had tried to protect me inside it. The difference between those choices was now obvious to me in a way it had never been before. Canceling the wedding was a logistical nightmare, of course. 14 months of deposits, contracts, seating charts, tastings, vendor emails, family expectations, and all the invisible labor that goes into a wedding before the event ever happens. People who have never planned one do not understand how much of your life gets tucked into it. I had to call my mother, then his mother, then our families, then aunts who had already bought dresses, then friends who had booked flights. I had to repeat some version of "it is not happening" so many times that the words lost their shape. Most people were decent, a few were nosy. A couple of relatives tried to tell me I should give Desmond a chance to explain himself properly, as if I had not already heard enough of his explanation to last a lifetime. My mother, who is not a woman easily rattled, came to stay with me for a week. I'm not going to tell you what to do, she said the first night as we sat on the couch with takeout containers between us. But I will tell you this. Anyone who recruits your wedding planner to sabotage your friends is not someone you can build a life with. I know. Good. Because if you had asked me for a second opinion, that would have been my first. I laughed, despite myself. Desmond tried 3 times to meet in person after that. The first 2 I ignored. The third time I replied with a single line, no further contact except through the lawyers. He sent one final email that tried to frame the whole thing as mutual misunderstanding and bad timing. I never responded. Some lies don't deserve the dignity of a debate. The breakup itself was not dramatic. No shouted crash, no thrown glass, no cinematic last kiss in the rain. Just the slow, awful administrative fact of ending a future. And then, almost embarrassingly, the world kept moving. Months later, when the contract disputes were settled and the complaint process had done what it could, I stored the printed backup venue confirmation. Wren had sent me in a small box with a few other things from that period. I kept the coffee shop receipt from the day I first met Odalys. I kept the email confirmation from Beatrix. I kept the photo of the garden venue that Wren had texted me the morning she switched reservations. I even kept the ugly little folder tab marked Wedding Admin, because there was something strange and grounding about seeing a container for a life that almost happened but didn't. What I did not keep were most of Desmond's things. He collected the rest of his belongings in a single afternoon while I was at work. I asked him not to be there when I came home. He complied, which was the last favor he ever did for me. There were moments after the breakup when I was angry enough to replay everything in my mind on purpose. The same way you touch a sore tooth with your tongue just to check if it still hurts. I would think about the conference room, about his voice saying make it look accidental, about Priscilla calmly negotiating damage control consulting. I would think about Colette, who I never actually met, and wonder whether she knew he was engaged when they started up. I would think about all the times he had kissed me after messaging someone else. Then I would stop myself and remember that the most important truth was not the one that hurt the most. It was the one that saved me. My friends told me. They were scared and messy, and not always confident, but they told me. They gave me a chance to know before the wedding, before the vows, before I was legally or emotionally deeper in than I already was. They did what Desmond and Priscilla tried to prevent. They let the truth get to me. 2 years later I did get married, but not to Desmond, and not in the same life I had built around him. I married someone else entirely. Someone steadier and quieter in the right ways. A man who does not need a room to turn toward him because he is not performing for it. Our ceremony was small. The flowers were simple. The venue was beautiful in a way that did not require a planner with a secret agenda to hold it together. Wren stood beside me as my maid of honor. During her toast, she took a breath, looked at me in that direct way she has, and said, "Some people think the hardest part of loving someone is keeping them happy. I think sometimes the hardest part is being brave enough to tell them the truth before it would be easier to stay quiet."
She did not mention names. She didn't need to. Everyone who mattered understood exactly what she meant, and I did too. Afterward, when the room had softened into music and low conversation, and the safe kind of laughter that only comes when the people around you actually know your story, I stood near the window and looked out at the lights in the garden. I thought about how close I had come to marrying a man who was building a separate life under my nose. I thought about a wedding planner who chose a secret payment over integrity. I thought about the hallway outside Priscilla's office, and the fact that I had heard just enough to change the course of my life, but not so much that I rushed in blind. Sometimes people talk about signs as if they're dramatic things. A phone rings at the right moment. A stranger says something strange. A door is left open. But the sign that changed everything for me was not magical. It was a voice in a conference room saying the timing needs to look accidental.
Everything after that was work. Mine, Wren's, Odalys's, Beatrix's, and even my mother's in her own quiet way. Work to find out what was real. Work to refuse the version of events Desmond and Priscilla wanted to sell me. Work to end a future I had once been willing to build. I am grateful for that work now, even though I was devastated by it then. Because the life I have now was not the one I thought I was protecting that Thursday afternoon. It was the one waiting for me after I stopped letting other people decide when I was allowed to know the truth.